Very well. Thank you so much for tuning in on us today. This is the Reflections and Notions in Cannabis podcast. I'm Kerry Black, and with me is Grace Duffy, and we'll get into an introduction for Grace here in a moment. If you enjoy this video, please click like and subscribe. We try to produce a different video with a mover and shaker in the industry about every 2 weeks. And we've got some really great podcasts coming up, and we have some really good ones behind us. So check out our Yahoo YouTube. I'm sorry, I said Yahoo, my YouTube page. I'm not Tom Brokaw or anybody like that. So bear with me. At any rate, with us is Grace Duffy. Grace, thank you so much for sitting in with us. I'm going to start by saying that about a month ago, Grace did a presentation to the local ASQ section entitled The Future of Quality, and kind of a 5-year assessment of where quality appears to be going. And we're talking quality systems and that kind of thing. Grace has been a quality guru for, I don't know, 50 years, 40 years. I'll let her get in and share some of her history, but I've had the privilege to work with Grace through different ASQ efforts over the last 20 years, and she's very knowledgeable and probably one of the heaviest hitters in quality in the United States, and respected as such. Many books, many publications, but I'll let Grace tell you a little bit about herself. And with that, Grace, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Kerry. You humble me, and I started to laugh when you said the last 50 years, but you know, it's close. It is about 45. A long time, just bizarre. Time flies. And yes, Kerry, I've enjoyed working with you for the last 20 years, and I'm really pleased with what you've done in these last years in standardization and in trying to help this emerging cannabis industry become salient, become scalable, become useful in a food safety environment, and also with its full supply chain. So I'm really pleased you've asked me to be with you. Yes, I've been in the quality arena for a good long time, spent about 20 years in IBM, retired as head of corporate technical education, got very, very involved in process work then. And then when I left IBM and went in as a chair and a dean at a two-year technical college in Charleston, South Carolina, I became the owner of the quality curriculum for the state of South Carolina, and then taught a 6-course quality certificate that ended up being a major in the associate degree in business and management at the college. For the last 20 years, I've been in private services and done a lot of work with government, healthcare, with industries, not-for-profit, whatever, having a wonderful time, doing the same thing that you and Ed are doing at Gap Cross and also in your own personal work with standards and improvements. And then I'm currently on the ISO Tag 304 group for a quality management system in healthcare, having piloted and facilitated the US healthcare quality management system development through ASQ. So I'm delighted to be here. Thank you. If I can share any thoughts that would be useful to you and your membership, I would love to be able to do so.
Well, thank you, Grace. And I couldn't think of a better person to have this conversation with. And so to set the stage for it, we're looking at the cannabis industry as a whole, and it's a very complex and difficult industry if you think about the net effects of the questionable legalization status across different states, the different rules with each state, the fact that at least recreational use is still illegal at the federal level. And within that complex narrative are these sort of crazy paths of what to do and what not to do. At the end of the day, we really, if people are going to consume cannabis products, which they are, and that's not going away, we need to make sure that all of those products are safe for human consumption, that contaminants have been adequately mitigated, that the food prep or dietary supplement prep facilities are sanitary, that we're not introducing things to consumers that could be constitute health risks or that kind of thing. And there's a lot of potential contaminant sources with cannabis. And in fact, we're putting on an ASTM symposium in spring of 2023 that's specifically dealing with sort of the contaminants in cannabis, looking at pesticides, microbials, and heavy metals. And really, it's a white paper, will have to be submitted and peer reviewed. It's going to reflect kind of the state of the art that exists currently. So I'll have more on that later for y'all that are interested. However, right now we have an industry that a lot of folks can't afford to go down the path of full GMP, and a lot of folks can't afford to put in these quality management systems and hire the level of quality staff required to administrate these systems effectively. And because of that, it's kind of a wild west out there right now. And sitting with different state groups in their regulatory prognostications, at least as to how they want to move forward regulating the industry. Consumer safety plays a huge role in that. But how can you regulate the industry without breaking the bank? And let's face it, GMP, having a fully GMP conforming facility is not cheap. It's not cheap at all. And again, that scale up is really a problem. And we think about what's quality looking like in the next 5 years. I think that is a huge consideration. How do we implement quality to the level that Dr. Deming would have a smile on his face, but then have people be able to afford that? How do we do that? That's the stage I set for the conversation. I'm going to turn it over to Grace.
Well, and thank you, Carrie, and I appreciate that image, because as you talked and as we just introduced ourselves before you began the recording, you mentioned the issue of food safety and certainly GMP, and I think that's really critical. And the more we talk, the more I was thinking about the standards that are there in 21 CFR, 21 CFR 21, in that food safety arena, because there we have the same idea as farm to market. We're looking at the same small grower. We're looking at somebody who can get the seeds, be they tomato seeds or be they be cannabis seeds, go into a plot and make sure that the ground that they're growing in is safe, is toxin free. Now, when we go to the tomatoes at the roadside stand, I don't know right now that there is any regulation of that roadside stand. It's you take your risk and you buy the tomatoes and you hope that they were not grown somewhere where the Army was leaving biomedical, whatever it was, waste in it. But then you get into that next level of, but now I want to sell my tomatoes to the home market store that's in my community. Well, that home market store is registered with the local county and with the Department of Health or the Department of Agriculture. And there is some level of threshold from the suppliers that they pull. And so there's that level. And then from there, if you want to sell to Kroger or to Publix or to Walmart, there's another level. And that's kind of where I was going in my mind as you talked about it. Strategically, we need to have these different levels of risk management in what you were talking about. Now, am I off base, or is this something that's being even talked about in the cannabis industry now?
Well, I think people are coming to that realization, and that is basically a suggestion that Ed and I put forth to the state of Colorado, that we basically have different phases of deployment of very simple guidelines for sanitation and contamination mitigation. Start from there and put it in the hands of the manufacturers. Let them see where their gaps are through a self-assessment, and then let them propose how they're going to do corrective actions using their own creativity and the resources they have to bear. And I believe that a successive, phased out, graduating plan, increasing those levels that you just referred to, is going to be a self-driven process. And I believe that that is a much cleaner path to success for the consumer safety objectives. So yes, we're talking about that now and really seeking
And I
guidance.
totally agree with you, because it's, if you leave it in the hands of the people who choose to transact, then that makes sense. If you've got the supplier, if they want to stay in their local niche without worrying about washing the leaves off, if they're happy to send the stalks and the neighbors come pick them up, they're taking the risk and it's well known. But if they want to expand their market into the local farmers market, and the county then regulates it to whatever standards we have at the county level, then they know they're going to play in a different ballpark. They know they're playing in a different level of requirement, and they choose that expansion. Now, you also were talking about the education to help these growers, the mom and pop folks, to be trained well enough to understand their risks and to understand the CAPA, how they would mitigate those risks, because they're going to have a certain amount of liability. And so that I really liked your idea of the CAPA procedures that you've already put in place, and that make them available either from the local Department of Agriculture Extension Service, or through the Department of Health, or through the local county office for the Department of Agriculture in general, whatever it is, so that they have an opportunity to get that material and arm themselves. The other thought, and I don't know how pervasive this is around the states, but we have a local technical college. Obviously, I was a chair and a dean at one that had continuing education. And if there are members of the ASTM, just like we have members of the American Society for Quality in these geographic areas, who are willing to work with those continuing education groups to provide small workshops that are reasonably priced, where people can sign up and learn, so that they are facilitated in being able to go at those gradients of standardization and gradients of threshold, not really certification, because that implies something much more complex. But there really are ways that the local government and the local, or even professional societies such as ASTM or ASQ, can provide local training. And then the professional societies get recertification units for providing the training. Your organization can provide the materials at some reasonable price to recover your time and effort. And then the communities can grow on their own, very much like there are local real estate people getting their real estate licenses. There are local real estate agents who are certified to be able to teach those real estate licenses. ASTM might be able to, or just you and your private industry and your colleagues' private industries can create those materials and make them standardized. They don't need it at that level to be content validated like the graduate record exams or the SATs that our high school students take. Just some thoughts.
I like that. It's a very interesting idea, and I think that's starting to happen a little bit.
Good.
I've talked to, certainly consultants in the industry realize that a lot of them, that full path to GMP is untenable. We know how to come in and we know how to make it work for you. But we find that lack of complete empirical understanding of exactly what it means, and the idea of risk assessment, and that is mysterious to a lot of the folks. And at the end of the day, they're pulling out their wallet and they're putting $100 bills on the table, hoping to magically be somewhere down the road in a way that conforms to those, and it can become very cumbersome and expensive and impact the bottom line in a way. As they're on the road there, they can't afford it, and so they don't, not realizing.
Well, they don't, and they know that they don't, and they know they can't, and that's one of the issues. You bring up another thought, and this may or may not be a reasonable thought to bring up. The Morgan and Morgan, great big law firm in Florida, he is very vocal in his saying he has become involved in the cannabis industry. Basically, it was prompted because he has a brother who uses medical marijuana and has prescriptions for it because of intense pain, and he's physically debilitated. And so the John Morgan has advertised for the legalization of medical marijuana within the state of Florida. Now, at the same time, I believe he also, because of his interest, has invested in marijuana farms and is going through that process. Now, he's an example, a very well-regulated example of the high end. I wouldn't be surprised if he is already into a good, strong supply chain at the most regulated level, because he's a lawyer anyway, and he realizes the risk and liability. Now, I don't want to get sued by bringing his name up, other than he's pretty vocal in his public advertising. On the other hand, you're right. If you have somebody in Colorado or in Florida who has been out in the middle of the field somewhere with their illegal plot as of 10 or 12 years ago, and now they're happy that it's legal, that they can grow it, but they're also the same culture, the same frame of mind that said, I'm a child of the 60s or a child of the 70s. I didn't care whether it was illegal or not. I have this rogue personality anyway. We're taking that group of people who loved marijuana because, I mean, for anybody who tried it, you remember it was really fun in the 60s or 70s. We don't do it now for whatever reasons. But those people now are having to say, now I have to follow the rules. Now I have to toe the line to some standards, when in their environment, they were the hippies. They were the ones who said, no, I don't want to play by the rules. And now if they want to be in the market, they have to play with the rules. And so that's the niche that may or may not decide to go into those higher levels. They're just going to have to stay in a niche that either keeps them legal at whatever level of risk there is and county monitoring, or they're going to have to stay illegal. And I don't know how much that's still there, and you do. So how much is that an issue of mindset in who's supplying the medical marijuana product?
I don't think we really know, to be honest with you. Either you have a license given by the state or you do not.
It's a good point.
What we're trying to do is standardize, essentially, in terms of risk assessment and quality systems, a way to assure consumer safety. The dynamic that you talked about, I think probably, in all honesty, represents kind of a minimum amount of stakeholders in the industry. I would say the bulk of the stakeholders are people that believe that cannabis is a growing industry and is going to be a very not popular, but profitable industry. And so you've got a lot of high-end investors that are investing in it under the belief that it's going to be a gold mine. And I think we've seen that typical trend, although since COVID and over that time, it's becoming more questionable as to how profitable it'll be. And so we are seeing deep pockets kind of becoming more shallow. And for companies that have established themselves, there's a lot of acquisitions and growth.
Yes.
They're becoming what they call multi-state operators and assimilating many of the smaller, less successful. And that seems to be the trend we're looking at now. And I'm not sure that's necessarily a good thing for the industry. I think, completely turning it into corporate approaches is going to create monopolies, which will have impacts on pricing.
Yeah.
I think allowing or figuring out a way that everyone can produce safe product in a way that's affordable should be the real big thrust. And we don't want to see businesses being put down because of regulatory oversight, which is definitely, if things continue the way they are, we will see a huge decline in the cannabis industry because of, especially when it's not when or if, it's when it's fully legalized at the federal level, the FDA is going to swing in big time, and there's going to be a lot of people left holding a bag and not being able to meet those requirements. I believe that. Now that's a prediction. It may not come to pass, and there may be other folks that don't share that particular view of the future. But I do, despite where anything's going, the dissemination of good quality practices needs to occur in order to have practical, good root cause analysis, corrective actions, change management. You need to be able to control your documents so you can keep historical records of all the little changes and why they happen. You need those systems in place, whether you're a mom and pop or whether you're a big corporate entity with 200 people in your quality department. So the future of quality is going to really, I believe, in cannabis depend on how we go about deploying that. And can we deploy it in such a way that even the small people can, recognize, it doesn't take much to spray some isopropyl on a stainless steel table and wipe it off with a paper towel after, a round of production where you have contact surfaces. So you clean, right? You clean little stuff like that. And I believe that whole idea of quality needs to be reflected on, and possibly how it is deployed needs to change in order for the industry to truly blossom. So that's kind of my perception of the thing. It makes sense to me. It may not make sense to other folks, but I think from a logical perspective, it's a great place to start in terms of making cannabis safe for everybody.
Well, I appreciate that, because I think it is a good view. As you were talking, I was thinking about the local farmers co-ops, the wheat farmers, the corn farmers, the soybean farmers. You have the small plots. And in the 1800s, early 1900s, and then the Future Farmers of America, you had the co-ops that kind of brought the next generation into the sanitation, into the distribution, into the cash flows back. You delivered your product based on a requirement of who was going to pay you for your bushels of wheat or corn or whatever it was. And then you also were trained by them on how to keep things clean, not just the isopropyl, but let's keep the corners of the room clean, because you really need to make sure that you don't have mice droppings or whatever it is. And it's all the same thing. I don't care how green the leaves are or what they are, you're going to have that same issue. So if there's some benchmarking that can be done with the co-op concept that then feeds into that larger FDA, Department of Agriculture, huge megalithic complex, then you're really showing down into the individual producer, but you're growing up into a co-op function so that the locals can talk with each other and learn from each other, but also they can get maybe the sponsorship of that next level up of the funding, because it's worth it for the next level up to fund the training for the people who are going to supply good product to them. And that is benchmarkable, I think, through the Department of Agriculture and some of the, like University of North Carolina or some of the other agricultural schools, University or State University of Alabama or State University of wherever, the farming universities probably have Clemson. That's the one I'm trying to think about, is huge in South Carolina. for that sort of work. Now, I have no idea whether South Carolina has approved the cannabis industry or not. I haven't followed it.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the laws of
I'm
South
not either.
Carolina either.
But the facilities are there, and certainly Florida State in Tallahassee probably has the same sort of thing. Now, I don't know what they have in Louisiana where you are. I know Colorado State University is quite extensive up in Fort Collins. But that's just another thought of using that quality benchmarking concept of what's happening now, and can we roll the cannabis industry into that same concept of local communication, and then the group grows, the consensus circles go out into more and more complex, as you've talked about. And you're right, more complex, more highly regulated, higher risk, higher liability. You're talking with a lot of money.
Oh,
And yes, you're right. There are going to be a lot of mergers and acquisitions as the industry standardizes, as bigger companies see the potential of the cash flow. If the potential's not there, then yes, you're right. The investment bankers are going to go away, and the market will just kind of settle down like Cabbage Patch dolls did 20, 30 years ago.
right.
Big thing for a while. Hey, this is exciting, but okay. So let's standardize it, and it'll all, you get the peak, and then it'll all settle back down again like a normal business curve. We'll see what happens. But I think what you're trying to do is excellent, because you're helping people to become self-sufficient within a structure that they can read about. And if it's not documented, if we don't have standards, people are shooting in the wind. And the work that you're doing in documenting the CAPA, in documenting risk analysis, in documenting basic procedures that the mom and pop shops can read just at night when they finally put their feet up for a moment and figure out what they need to do to register at the local county, whatever it is, you're really being a help, and you're helping them into the system.
That's some really great perspective. I agree. The co-op model is a fabulous model to disseminate resources, essentially, through that whole co-op approach. And I've seen a few examples of cannabis-related co-ops that have done very well. And I actually worked with one that has a co-op organization that services Tennessee, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi. And
nice.
It's a pretty interesting dynamic. Now they're not doing human consumables. They are doing biodiesel using hemp, and
oh yes,
collecting all the residual biomass that's waste on various cannabis plants or farms or what have you, and utilizing that in their process as a raw material, setting up the co-op to provide the sort of lower cost distribution, and set up local distribution centers that are centralized, and everyone gets a taste. And
yes,
that seems to have worked pretty well. Now that I'm not sure that's something that we can regulate, right? That the state can regulate. However, certainly people can reach out to these producers, and it can be suggested that perhaps somebody look into, trying to set up a co-op. I know a couple of people in Colorado that have been working on putting co-ops together just for that very purpose. And that's true. That could be a really great source of dissemination of low-cost quality resources to the mom and pop shops. And that.
Well, and one of the things that ASQ does, and I suspect ASTM does as well, is write white papers and make them available to your membership as a member benefit of paying your dues. And if someone were to write a paper or a guideline on how to set up a co-op, that might be even more useful to the ASTM members, just as a way to get that started. And it can be electronically anymore with technology. Most of the farmers have got some sort of wireless or internet going on at home, and they can download those papers and just see if it's worthwhile. And then there's enough
I like that.
groups on LinkedIn or whatever, that they can get to their peers in a community, in a county or in a region or whatever it is, and start putting that together if they chose. Now, that's a real grassroots kind of thing. But if ASTM were to document and write it up as a potential, you might spark a flame. I have no idea.
No, I think that's a fabulous idea. In fact, I really like that idea. And I just so happen to be the chairman of the subcommittee on D37, which is the Cannabis Technical Committee.
Woohoo.
That is D3706, and that's personnel, training, credentialing, and certifications. And I could see a standard, an ASTM standard, how to form a cannabis co-op. And
Wow,
literally
nice thought.
an ASTM standard, and I could do that under my subcommittee. I know there are people involved in my subcommittee that have done a lot of co-op work and would be great subject matter experts to draw on. So I really appreciate that idea. I think I'll have to explore that a little bit.
That'd be cool. Yeah. When I think about it, just the things I do here in my local county, I search like mad on the local county web pages looking for who's the marketing person that I should get hold of to buy a booth at the local First Friday meeting so that I can advertise something. I don't know how to get there, but something like what you're providing would at least give me the links of what would I start to look for.
Right.
So thank you. Good. I'm glad that might be useful somewhere.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm hoping that I can share our talk with some of the groups I'm working with, and just kind of help spur different ways of thinking about it. Because that's really what we need, different out the box ways of getting stuff done. Because how it was ain't gonna fly coming to how it will be.
No. Just going into the beach house and having somebody hand me some interesting smelling thing in the 1970s is a whole lot different than what you're doing now.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So anyway, yeah, that's a pretty really some really great insight from you, Grace. And I think we're reaching the end of our time for our chat. So I was basically just wanted to ask you if you have any sort of last minute thoughts on how we might improve our quality deployment. It's kind of a hard question, isn't it? But that's okay.
Well, yes and no. I think you've already started doing that in realizing that you have benchmarks in the GMP, you have benchmarks in the CFRs, the ones for food safety, the ones, let me see, you were talking about dietary supplements, even the pharma as we work through them. And why reinvent the wheel? Go through that. But I think you're really right. We can't make it so complex that people who have an extra 40 acres out back can't use that now in a legalized version to provide product that's going to be helpful to people, either in a large supply scale or in a locally more exploitable arena. And the more you can give them structure, maybe not standards that they have to salute to, but risk assessments, structure, ability to even understand what it would look like and where they would need to get permits and where they would not, to understand some of that and help them in the local differences. Because you're right, the states are all different right now. And I have no idea whether at the county level there's even some differences. So the better you and ASTM can help people navigate all of that, I think it's going to be wonderful. And I still think you're right. I think the industry is going to consolidate. It's going to have to. Right now, there are some of us who are very positive who think, oh, this can really go somewhere. However, I had just one little CBD ointment on my counter that my niece gave me that I use for, I don't know, calluses on my feet or something. And it's not like I've rushed out and bought 10 more of them. So I'm not quite sure whether I'm the prime target, but I use the product and I think it's great. There got to be a lot of me's out there somewhere. So anything I can do to help you, I would love to. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Grace. And thank you for visiting us on our podcast. reflections and notions in cannabis. And if you like the content, if you like the video, please click like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.